Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari, and this is Great Big History Podcast. This is a new season. We're starting something new. We're still working on some of the old stuff, like the Baltic Wars, but it's a new semester, and so we're going to start redoing the ancient world, the medieval world, and the modern world lectures to reflect a different way of doing things. We're going to do things in a more, what's called a reverse class. The idea is that we start with the question, and then we get to the context afterwards. So instead of it being all narrative, instead of being the story, and then pulling out a question from that, we're going to start with the question and get to the stories. And so the idea of this is to give it more direction, to keep it more efficient, to streamline. So thank you for joining us. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari, and this is 10 Questions, Early Nomadic Civilizations. So we start with the basic question of what is the natural state, the most common state of human civilization? And that is, as the title suggests, nomadic. People moving from place to place searching for food. Multiple waves of different human species do this over the course of several 100,000 years. So that by around 25,000 BCE, almost all of the land on Earth has had human contact. And they're going from place to place looking for food, looking for safety, looking for security. So then what is the normal state of human economics? If economics is the possession of stuff and the use of stuff, what is the natural or most common normal state for humans? And the answer may surprise you, but it is communism. Now, we're not talking Marx, we're not talking Lenin, we're not talking Stalin, we're not talking totalitarian states. We're talking kind of what Marx envisioned in his post-industrial world was a pre-industrial world. And the idea was everybody contributes. Everyone contributes to the best of their abilities. Everyone receives what they need. There is no private ownership. There is no capitalism. You don't own the food. You don't own the goods. You don't even own your children. They belong to the group. You don't own land because you're constantly moving. And so for 4 million or so years, 4, 5, 6 million, depending on when we find out that humans finally became humans, it's every decade it gets pushed a little farther back. But the idea is 4 or 5 million years ago, people shared. And it makes sense. And we'll talk about this a little later. But these are very poor people who own nothing, who are completely reliant on each other for their help. If you caught an antelope, it's not your antelope. One, you caught it as part of a group. It may not have been the entire tribe, but it was a group, 3, 4, 5, 6 people that helped you catch that antelope. 2, there's no refrigeration. You can't eat all the meat on the antelope. So everyone shares. 3, there's going to be times that you don't catch the antelope and you're going to need to eat. Now in capitalism, we say, hey, go catch yourself an antelope. The antelope I caught is mine. That's not how people lived. 4th is the group is more important than individuals. Group survival is more important than individuals. And what about old people? They can't go out and hunt. What are they supposed to do? They're raising your kids. They're looking after the kids while you go and hunt, but they should get nothing. What about the warrior who's wounded, who's gored by a ox while trying to get some food, while trying to kill it? Should he get nothing? So the idea is kind of the original idea of communism, the communism of the church potluck, the communism of early Christianity, the communism kids do, and when you go out to eat at Friendly's and everyone shares fries, and takes sips of each other's Coke, that kind of communism. Everybody contributes to the best of their abilities, and everyone receives what they need from the society. So it may just be surprising to people, but this is how for 4 million years people lived. And in small, especially poor groups, this is how people still live. For all of our talk of communism, I have never been to a church potluck in the basement of a good old Baptist church and been charged to eat someone's chicken pot pie. Not once. And nor have I ever charged anyone for my lasagna. Nor did I take the lasagna and say, I made it, it's mine, I bought the ingredients, you can't have. Well, that's capitalism. And that works for certain things. But you have to remember that there are plenty of relationships that we have. I mean, Christmas is a good one, where you give to the best of your ability and you receive from everyone. So, communism, original communism, not Marxism, not Stalinism, but old-fashioned community economics is how most people lived through most of human existence. So then whose labor is more important in these hunter-gatherer societies? Is it the men who hunted the wild meats, or is it the women who gathered the berries and the nuts? The work was gendered. Now, it wasn't completely gendered. Could men gather the nuts and the berries? They could. Yeah, of course they could. Could women do hunting with a bow and a javelin and a stake? Of course they could. So it's one thing you'll learn in this history class is the idea that never happened. There's always an exception. Everything, all of history is a bell curve. If you ever say, was there anybody? The answer is, of course, yes. Were there a lot of them? No. Or they would have been the norm. But did they exist in every shape, form, size, color? Yeah. Anything people can do, they did. So, whose calories are more important? Whose labor is more important? And the answer is, of course, the women. That's the answer. Now, might the protein have been more important calorically than the berries and the nuts and the fruits and the veggies? Sure. But they were rarer. They were harder to get. Women's calories were more dependable. So you ate them more. And even today, think about it. Any good diet tells you to have a lot more fruits and a lot more veggies than meat. It's weird we eat meat like every meal. That we have meat with breakfast and then have a burger for lunch and then have a steak for dinner. Like, that's weird. It's weird seeing these paleo diets. When paleo diet is nuts, berries, fruit, veggies, roots, and a little bit of meat every once in a while. Most people didn't eat meat. So women's calories are way more important. And if you've been hunting, you know this. You absolutely know this if you've ever been hunting, because you could go hunting. You go get your gun, and you get your camouflage, and you get your deer pee, and you go up in the tree, and you get your sights, and you get all the high powered technology, and you could sit there all weekend and catch nothing. Because you're totally reliant on a thing that does not want to be turned into venison walking by. And then you have to be able to hit it. And then you have to be able to hit it well enough that you kill it. It doesn't run off. And so that's hard. There are plenty of times where you will go out and not catch anything. And even if you do catch something, it could take you all day. It could take you hours upon hours upon hours. And now take away all that technology. Take away the camouflage. Take away the deer pee and the pheromones. And go down. Take away the compound bow. Just go down to a bow that you had to pull the actual weight on. And suddenly you can see how hard catching meat was. So what's the result? What is the result of women's labor being more important? Or not more important, but women's labor being important? Well, the answer is women had rights. And what may surprise you is the number one right that they had was control of their body. They had a determination over who the father of their children would be, who they had sex with. So the idea of the caveman hitting the cave woman over the head with the big branch and then dragging her off to ravage and rape her. No. Now we'll talk about war, and that's a different thing. But that caveman hitting the woman over the head, no. Now, did women get to choose who their husband was out of love and on their own? No, of course not. Nobody's going to let a teenager make that big of a decision. Remember, the group is more important. And so it's in everyone's interest that the right people are hooked up with the right people. And so everyone will have a say. Parents will have a say. Elders will have a say. Old people in other families will have a say. They'll be like, no, we can't have Michelle go out or go get married to Rob. Oh, no. She's a good woman. She's going to be great. She's going to make a wonderful wife. She's a future leader. He, on the other hand, steals squirrels from people. And so everyone's going to want to have a say. So there is no concept of like love and individuality that you get to choose. Additionally, women will have important roles in the society, as I've already alluded to. There'll be counselors to decisions, midwives and doctors. Like the idea that a man delivers a baby is kind of insane. Because what does a man know? I mean, he's got plenty of book knowledge, modern day book knowledge, fine. But what does he know about giving a birth to a baby? He don't know nothing about giving birth to babies. And so who were the midwives? They were women. Women who had given birth. Women who knew that when a certain grunt or a certain scream happened, they went, that's wrong. That's a breach. That's coming out sideways. We're going to have to do something. And had the experience to know what to do. Now, did it work every time? No, of course not. But the idea that you'd have a man around is kind of crazy. What does a man know about birth and babies? Nothing. So they would be priestesses. and holy women. And of course there were. There's a whole realm of life that's women only. Fertility, birth, sex, that are all wrapped up in a woman's life, in a woman's existence. Why would you have a male priest do that? That doesn't make any sense. I'm Catholic, and the idea that the Catholic priests don't have any women and that Catholic priests are going to tell women how to live a good Christian life is kind of crazy. Since the Catholic priest is supposed to be celibate, what does a virginal man know about living life as a Christian woman? The answer is nothing. And so, nomadic peoples are way more practical than modern peoples are in their gender roles. There are proper gender roles that are based on the work, on the experience, on your on the lived experiences of people. Sometimes women can be leaders. Sometimes they can be warriors. It's less likely. But the idea that a woman would have no idea how to shoot a bow, that's kind of silly too. Would have no idea how to throw a spear is kind of silly. They need to hunt sometimes in extremity. So women have these roles because they're important to the survival of the group. How did law work in nomadic societies? Well, it worked on consensus based on traditions. There is a great scene in like the first or second season of Game of Thrones when Daenerys is talking to the other nomadic horsewives of the Dothraki, and she says something, and they laugh, and they go, no, it is this. This is the answer. Whatever the answer is, they give the answer. And she goes, how do you know? And she goes, because it is known. It is known. Everybody knows it. It's common sense. Well, who knows the traditions? Who knows what the laws were? Who knows what the punishments were? Old people. So if it worked in the past, people keep it. Remember, these are societies that are one winter away from starving to death. They're one battle away from being obliterated and dead. They are right on the edge of life and death and existence. One bad move and everything, not just for the person, but for the entire society, can come crashing down. And so if it worked in the past, they keep doing it. But how do you know what worked in the past? Again, old folk. Now, what do we mean by old? If you lived to be 40, you were old in these societies. In fact, into the 20th century, when my grandmother was born, she would have been happy to have reached 45. That was the average age of when one died, of what one lived to. The life expectancy when my mother was born was somewhere around 40 to 45 years of age. She lived to be 90. That's what the 20th century and modern medicine did. But for most people's existence, it was 35 to 40. So if you reached 40, you were old. If you reached 50, you were really old. If you reached 60, you were ancient. And if you reached 70, you were so old you had outlived everybody who you had ever known as a child. And you were so old at that point that people put old in your name, like the old crone, the old man. You put old in it because no one could remember when you were young. They only know you as old. So if you reached 80 or 90, like Augustus. Augustus was the first emperor of Rome. He lived to be like 72. He outlived 3 generations of people. He outlived the memory of the Roman Republic. When he died, there was no one left in the Senate who could remember a time when he wasn't in charge. And so old folk know the traditions. And they're illiterate societies. There's no writing. So the only way to pass down the laws is to share them orally, is to speak them. So you need the old people who know. And so justice is meted out by consensus. A bunch of old people get together and discuss it. And it's communal. Everyone has an interest in fair justice. So if someone steals my goats, right? I wake up and I'm missing 2 goats. Where do I go? Well, I go to the local bar. I go to the local gathering hall where people drink and hang out and talk about stuff. And I ask, anybody see any goats? I'm missing 2 goats. And someone says, oh, Billy. Billy walked in here earlier saying he found 2 goats. So what am I going to do? Am I going to go over to Billy? Knock on his tent? No. Because that's a confrontation. Because I'm going to accuse him of having my goats. He's of course going to say no. And it's of course going to end up in fisticuffs. It's of course going to be me punching him in the face and him punching me back. And that doesn't help anybody. That's not good for the group. Remember, the group is more important than the individual. So here I am. I'm mad. I think Billy stole my goats. What do? I go to my aunts. I go to my elder. I go to the oldest person in my family. I go to Grandpapa. And I say, Billy stole my goats. And what does Grandpapa do? Grandpapa calls up Billy's Grandpapa or Grandmama, since this is not gendered. It's just the oldest person in the family. And says, hey, we have to have a talk. We'll meet in the back of the diner. Yeah. And so now this is interesting. So who shows up at 11:30 noon in the back of the diner? My grandpapa, Billy's grandpapa, because they have to discuss this out. But also the 3, 4, 5 other old people in the society. And they're going to sit at one end of the table. They're not listening, but they're totally listening. And my grandpa and Billy's grandpapa are going to sit down and talk about it. And what are they going to say? My grandpapa is going to say, you have to get back to goats. And Billy's grandpa is going to say, oh, he doesn't have the goats. And we're going to say, oh, of course he doesn't. It's going to be 15 minutes. And then they're going to admit, okay, he has the goats. And then there's going to be, all right, he'll give back the goats. And then there's going to be restitution. There has to be restitution. Otherwise, what would stop him from doing it again? What would stop anybody from doing it again? Then the incentive is to get away with it. So there has to be a punishment. And everybody knows there has to be a punishment. And so my grandpapa says, well, I want the highest punishment I can get, so I want to cut off his hands. Billy's grandpapa, of course, says no, because Billy's grandpa is his lawyer. He's there to defend Billy. Whatever, he knows Billy's guilty. He knows Billy's got to be punished. He wants the punishment to be as low as possible. So, of course, he's going to object to cutting off Billy's hands. That's crazy, right? Is it? I don't know. Who knows? The 5 or 6 other old people at the end of the table who are having their kitchen chicken cacciatore. They're having their Cabernet Blanc, and they're sitting there, and they're drinking away, and they're having a good time, and they hear cut off his hands, and they go, oh, this, I don't know. Have you ever had a wine that tastes like this? I don't know about that. Because remember, they're not listening, but they're totally listening. And that tells my grandpapa there's not the support for that punishment. And so Billy's grandpapa counters and goes, okay, he's going to give back the 2 goats, and he's going to give like a chicken. But like not a good chicken, like a chicken with 1 wing. And again, my grandpa's going to, of course, object to that. That's way too low of a punishment. And down at the other end of the table, people listen and go, and that tells Billy's grandpapa that society thinks that's too low. And so in the end, what do? A sheep. All right, throw in a sheep. And at the end of the table, it's like, ooh, yeah, this is pretty good. Ooh, yeah. And you go, everybody knows, everybody agrees, and it's done. And so what happens is they finish up their lunch, they talk about the old times, they leave the room, and there's me and Billy staring at each other, right? And now I turn and go, what do I get? He's like, you get your 2 goats back. I go, okay, what else? Do I cut off his hands? He goes, no, you don't cut off his hands. You're going to get a sheep. A sheep? I don't want a sheep. You're getting a sheep, and that's the end of it. And that's the point of law. Law is not justice. Law is not fairness. We're going to talk about this a bunch of times when we do the law. Law is about getting people to not continue the fight. That's what it's about. It's about ending it. It's about ending the conflict. Am I going to be happy with just a sheep? No. But the rest of society walks out and go, hey, you got new sheep. That's good for you. Now, Billy's grandpapa is going to go over to Billy and say, all right, you're going to give him a sheep. Like, what? I'm going to give him a sheep? I don't even have the goats. I got to get a sheep. It's like, I'll give you the sheep. You just deal with it. It's fine. And that's what's going to happen. And so the community decided, and then the community accepts. If I go and I punch Billy in the face, I am now the assaulter. I have been given the 2 goats. I have been given a sheep. It's done as far as the society is concerned. So if I go and punch him in the face, I'm the bad guy. So then what is punishment then? Our next question, what is punishment? And what is punishment? It is mostly reputational. Because remember, it's about the group. No one wants to cut off Billy's hands because Billy's useful. Billy's got to go hunt. Billy's got to help. Carry stuff across rivers. There's no jail. You're going to have feed a guy and pay? Like, it costs $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year to put someone in jail. That's a lot of money. So the punishment is reputational. Billy has to give back the sheep. He has to give back the goats and has to restitute me a sheep, right? So what is he going to be known as forever? He's going to be known as the goat stealer. Well, let me ask you a question. Ladies, do you want to marry a goat stealer? Do you want your kids to be known as the son or daughter of a goat stealer? No. And so this is multi-generational. So who's going to marry the goat stealer? Someone who has no other choice. The daughter of a family who already doesn't have any other choices. And that's going to hurt the kids. Billy is never going to lead. Billy is never going to be the chief. So it's this multi-generational punishment. The children are never going to lead. They have to work the rest of their lives to not be known as the child of a goat stealer, right? Now, by the time of the grandchildren, that reputation kind of fades. Why? Because everybody who remembers that Billy was the goat stealer is dead. There's nobody left who remembers. It's like, yeah, wasn't your grandpa something? And if you're good at war and good at leadership, people forget and they'll move on. It might happen in the children's age, but it's usually definitely by the grandchildren's age. So then what's the worst punishment possible? It's exile. It's exile. It's to be cast out. That's the worst. And nobody wants to do this. This is the worst of the worst. People go, oh, they'll kill you. Exile is worse. Because you're isolated. You're on your own in a harsh world. The people who are supposed to love you, the people who help you, don't want you. Do you think another tribe's going to want you? Really? Really? They might. This is what happened to Genghis Khan. His first tribe was obliterated. But he found the second tribe and ended up leading it to glory. But for most people, exile means death. A lonely death where no one will remember you. How does leadership work? Well, you lead by example. It's personal leadership. It's the individual leadership. There's no institutions. There's no constitutions. There's no department of anything. Government is the person, the chief. So how do you become a leader? You have to have a combination of the right ingredients. You have to have kinship, right? Being the son of a goat stealer means you're never going to be chief. But being son of Eddie the Good, well, yeah, right? Yeah, sure. You have to have charisma. People have to like you. People have to follow you. People have to want to do what you tell them to do because you can't make them. People are people. And you can't make a group of people do something they don't want to do. So they have to want to. And that special ingredient is called charisma. And the third is moral strength. You have to lead by example. You have to do what you're asking people to do. People have to look at you and say, yes. Yes. Joe can do it. Joe gets it done. It's not physical strength, though that could be a part of it. It's moral strength. We're going to talk about this with Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh does not have moral strength. He's a king because his father was a king. That's it. That he's not nomadic. He's got institutions. They have rules. He's a king because his father was a king. And he's a drunk. And he's decadent. And he's licentious. And nobody likes him. That doesn't work in nomadic societies. In nomadic societies, the leader really has to earn being and, more importantly, staying as leader. So the advantage is you get good leadership. You get constant, but you get good leadership because there's no time for bad leadership. If Hillary Clinton was elected in 2016, she was going to be president for 4 years, whether you liked her or not. Donald Trump was elected in 2016. He was president for 4 years. And then after 4 years, our system is you have to ask to be president again. Right? But even though there was 2 impeachments, Donald Trump stayed president. That's how it works. That's how it works. That's not how nomadic systems work. Nomadic systems are you are one bad decision from everything falling apart. So there is no time to say, we'll see if he becomes presidential. We'll see if she works it out. There's some kinks in the system. No. And Joe Biden being chief? Not a chance. Why? He's too old. The big complaint about Joe Biden is, all right, fine. He's got the moral strength. People like him. He's got the charisma. But he's 80 years old. A Carl who cannot ride is no Carl. A chief who cannot chief is no chief. Right? The personal leadership, as Khal Drogo knows. Come at me, bro. I'm here. You have a problem with me? Come to me. The disadvantage is that there's no clear successor. So you have constant turnover, which can be a problem. Since they lead by example, they lead into battle. They lead into hunting. Well, they could get gored by a deer or an antelope. They could fall off their horse once we get horses. We haven't gotten horses yet. They could lose in battle. They'll get killed in battle. They don't survive defeats. Right? Khal Drogo in Game of Thrones has hair down to his bum. Why? He's never lost a fight. Ever. Not even like a fist fight. Never. He's never been humiliated, so he's never cut his hair. What happens when he loses? He dies. When he gets stabbed, it gets bad, he dies. But then who comes next? And in Game of Thrones, there was Daenerys and 2 other dudes. 2 of his brothers. So at the end of season 1, the Khal, which was 100,000 strong and was going to run over Westeros, broke up into pieces. This is exactly what happened to Attila the Hun. Attila the Hun had the Huns. They're invading the Roman Empire. They're crushing everything. He loses the battle of loses it in France to the Franks. And that night, he had a brain aneurysm. And what happened is, the Huns broke into 2 pieces. Attila had 2 brothers. They both wanted to be chief. So half the group wanted one guy to be chief. The other half wanted the other brother to be chief. And what happened? They broke up. And one invaded Italy and the other went back to the Ukraine. The steppe. So you have constant turnover, but you never know who the successor is. So there's always this problem of who is the next chief going to be? Who's the next leader going to be? Why did horses change everything? I've already mentioned horses. Why do they change everything? And the answer is they let people do more things. They cover more distances, which allows you for more food. You can recover from mistakes. You go into the wrong valley, you still have time to get out, go to the next valley over, find food. Speed and height, you're now 8 feet up in the air. You can move at 20, 25 miles an hour, maybe even faster at a full gallop. That gives you a military advantage over people who are on foot. the horse becomes the most important weapon in warfare until the rifle. And I don't mean the musket, I mean the rifle. And especially the machine gun. So you have a military advantage if you're on the horses. You have an economic advantage. You have a survival advantage. And then you have a personal wealth advantage, which is horses can carry more stuff. Think of it like your car versus your backpack. If you're walking every place, how much stuff can you have in your backpack? How much stuff do you have in your car right now? So that allows for more wealth for people. And that more wealth means better survival. How did nomadic people practice warfare? Well, war was competition. It was competition for food, which meant it was competition for survival. I need this valley's food, and if I don't get it, I'm going to starve, which means when I fight you in the valley, I can't share it. So we're fighting to the death. So victory means the complete eradication of competition. It means when you fight, when nomads fight, they obliterate the people they fight. They see them as competition for food. And food is relatively scarce. It's not actually scarce. It's actually just hard to get to, hard to find. And so there's a bunch of books that come out, and they come out every couple of years, and they're all like, oh, it was so much easier before farming. It was so much easier to not live in the city. It was so much easier to be rural and nomadic, and you got food after 20 minutes. And you're like, yeah, you got food after 20 minutes until the Huns came over the mountain and murdered you, like in Mulan, because they wanted the food. If you've ever watched Emmett Otter's Jug Band, you know Emmett Otter's going to win the winter competition until an out-of-town biker rock band comes out, plays their heavy metal music, and just takes the prize and thunders off. That's nomadic destruction. Watch Emmett Otter's Jug Band and watch nomadic destruction happen to Emmett. The men are killed, the women are married off to new husbands of the new tribe, and children are used as slave labor. And they are later incorporated into the tribe. So we'll break that down a little bit, and this may be traumatic or triggering for some of you. If you have experiences, we're not going to go into detail, so don't worry, but we're just going to kind of describe it. The men are killed. Why are the men killed? Because they're competition for food. You don't need grown men in your new tribe, so you kill the men. The women are married off to new husbands. Why? Why don't you just murder the women? Well, they're too important, and the reason why is you need women to have babies. And the most dangerous thing that happens to a woman in a woman's life, even today, is childbirth. And women died all the time in childbirth. It was the most dangerous thing a woman does in her life, even today, and it was much more dangerous then. You gave birth in the dirt. Nobody had any medical experiences, right? Nobody knew about germs or infections. Those of you who have had children know it is not a clean process. And so dirt, germs gets in, and you get sepsis, what the British used to call childbed fever. You gave birth, you were fine. 2 days later, you had a fever. 3 days later, you were dead. The infection goes into the blood, and it's carried to all the different organs. The organs shut down, and the fever. And the fever is not what kills you, I don't think. The fever is the symptom of what's killing you, and the symptom is the infection. And that happened to maybe, the numbers are all over the place, it's maybe as high as 30%. Now, half of all children are going to die before the age of 5 as well, from diseases, from accidents. And so you have a constant need in a tribe to have more women and more children. Now, do those women who are now war captives, whose husbands are dead, have a say in who they marry? The answer is most likely no. Is this non-consensual sex? Yes. Is it rape? By any modern definition, it is. Yes. This situation is, what other choice was there? There's death. There's running off into the wilderness to be alone. There's poverty and there's death. What is the advantage of this? The advantage is that, and this is why it's important to say, married. Now, I'm not condoning any of this. I'm just telling you how it worked. But the idea of marriage is the woman becomes part of the tribe. She may not be the most highly respected part of the tribe because she's a war captive, but her children will be part of the tribe. She, over time, will be part of the tribe. That's Daenerys in Game of Thrones, that they become part, they become incorporated. If you watch Avatar or you watch Dances with Wolves or The Searchers, it's the idea that they don't remain a war captive. They become part of the tribe. They get citizenship. It's a settled way of talking about it. And so while this can be very upsetting, and this is, by any modern definition, non-consensual, that is the disadvantage of it all. Your sexuality was not your own. The advantage was you could get it back. That you don't remain a war captive. You don't remain, the women are not slaves. They're not property. That's why the married part is important, because their children will be legitimate. And over time, they will become legitimate. But yes, if this is upsetting to you, you're right. It is upsetting. And this is why settled people are scared to death of nomadic peoples. This is why the Romans are terrified of when the Huns show up. This is why the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are not armies walking, living in cities. They're nomads. The Romans could handle people who live in cities and have armies. It's the nomadic people who scared them. So when they wrote about the end of the world, they don't write about armies coming to destroy them. They write about horse people. And so nomadic warfare scares people. See Revelations. See the Huns in Mulan. Right? Go watch Mulan. They're not nice guys. They're terrible. They're so bad. Mulan joins the army to go fight them. See Genghis Khan and the Mongols. See the Apache, the Comanche, the Sioux in a U.S. fiction. Read some Cormac McCarthy. See the movies of the Old West. Fair or not, the representation of men on horses is one of scared, of fear, that they are militarily scary and they are vicious in their society. That's how settled people feel about them. And that is a feeling that goes all the way back to here, to how nomads fought. And the realities of life and death. You didn't live to be that old, and women died all the time, and children died all the time. All the time. Getting pregnant into the 20th century for a woman was playing Russian roulette. So it's not a surprise that birth control is a major issue for women in the 20th century. Because it's like, I've done this. I've done it enough. Every time I'm intimate with my husband, it's like playing Russian roulette maybe we shouldn't. Maybe I don't want to. So gender and sexuality in a nomadic world is not all strawberries and whipped cream. And nobody pretended it was. So how did later settled people react to nomadic warfare? Well, what they did is try to stay away from them. We talked about how they scared, nomadic warfare scared them, so what did they do? They built walls. But to build walls, you needed kings. You needed taxes. So you need government. They need economics. To build walls to keep horses out. Because men on horses are not going to get off those horses. The moment they get off their horses, they're a dude on foot. They lose their advantage. And men on horses, the nomadic peoples don't live in cities, so they don't know how to tear down walls. They may never have seen walls in their entire life. And so the idea is you put up walls to try to keep them out, and you tell stories as a warning, which is what we've talked about earlier, Revelations and the Huns. So what result did the horse have on human geography? So if men on horses are so terrifying, what happens? Well, the horses, while being all-terrain vehicles, need food. They need fuel. And that fuel is grass, which is plentiful on the grasslands, the Great Plains, the steppe, S-T-E-P-P-E, of Eurasia in North Africa. Northern Africa, I should say. Not North Africa, but Northern Africa. Right south of the Sahara in North Africa. There are great green belts of flat land with lots of grass. And so what happens is these great flat lands that are easy for people to walk through too, those people get pushed out. People who do not domesticate horses, people who do not learn how to breed horses, who do not know how to break them and ride them and then make them make little horses, those people are either going to be obliterated, or for them to survive, they have to move into worse food zones, river valleys, which are mostly mud because the rivers are constantly flooding, forests, which are too dense for the horses to go through easily or to provide much grass, or mountain areas. Tibet is kind of the most famous, the Himalayas, that are too high to have large amounts of food that the horses can use. So horse people who are going to ride horses, are going to dominate the great steppe grasslands of Asia, of Europe, of Saharan Africa. And people who don't get horses, who don't have horses, are going to move into places, are going to be forced into places that are worse for food supplies. So, that's the end of our lecture. In our next lecture, we will be doing settle people, why people start to settle and farm and build cities. So, thank you very much. Be safe. Be careful out there.